Hi folks, Deacon Ed McCormick here, continuing my series of Sunday reflections. And today I want to do a two-part series addressing the question, why be a disciple of Jesus? Why be a Christian? Why be a Catholic? There are a lot of reasons, it seems today, to not be a Catholic. There are lots of difficulties people are having with the church, but I want to really focus our attention on why follow Jesus as a member of a faith community and as central to our own personal lives. And I want to start with today's gospel, which begins with a shocking line. At the end of chapter 14 of Luke's gospel, Jesus turns to the crowds and says, "If any of you wants to be my follower, my disciple, you must hate your mother and your father, your wife, your kids, even your own life." What is going on here? What a shocking statement. Because Jesus says to us that the entire New Testament is summed up in love God and love neighbor. His whole ministry is about love. His very death is the most dramatic act of love, even for his enemies. And he tells us to welcome the little children. So why is he telling us to hate our mother and father, our wives, our children, even our own life? Well, first of all, let's get clear. This is not a commandment from Jesus. In John's Gospel, chapter 16, Jesus does teach a commandment, and it is to love one another. He says, "They will know you are my disciples by your love." So this is not a commandment. This is a hyperbolic statement about the cost of discipleship. The great German Lutheran theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote a magnificent book called The Cost of Discipleship, inspired in many ways by this passage. And in this passage, Jesus also tells these two parables about a builder who has to estimate the cost it's going to take to put up a building, and a general who is going in battle and estimating how many soldiers he needs. These parables, this outrageous statement about hating our mother and father, all involve our challenge to assess the cost of discipleship. To follow Jesus is not easy. So then why would we? Why would we do it? Why would we pay the cost that can come from following Jesus? Now, the traditional answer is because then you'll get to heaven when you die. Now, that's not the answer Jesus gives. It's not the answer Paul gives. It's not the answer the best of our spiritual and theological tradition gives. Instead, Jesus' answer is that the kingdom of God is coming, that God is beginning to rule the world. And so to really appreciate why we should put up the cost that comes with being a disciple, what's the end of it for us? What's the value of it? Let me dive into this a little more. But the first thing we have to get clear is in Jesus' mind, God is beginning to rule the world. And this matters more than anything. Now, if you look around the world today, what seems to rule things are wars. Wars in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, the war in Sudan, the horrors of violence that are happening in Haiti, in our cities, often in our schools and homes. So war and violence seems to dominate things. So does injustice and corruption and cruelty and brutality. We're watching our own federal government in the United States act with cruelty and indifference to immigrants, raiding people's workplaces, pulling them out of their cars, arresting them without cause, trying to deport them. So we're living in a world dominated by injustice and cruelty and brutality and indifference and violence and war. And we would love nothing more than for all of these forces to be gone, and that the world be replaced by peace, by justice, by access to health care and food, where everyone has access and the right to vote and to get an education. We would love a world where our planet is not under attack by the forces of industry. And so the kingdom of God that Jesus is proclaiming, the coming rule of God, means that God is beginning to take charge and kick out the forces of war and violence. And if you read the great prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah, this is exactly what they promise. They promise that one day God will rule as king of the earth. So this kingdom of God is cosmic regime change. And so what's more important than anything for Jesus is that God has begun to act through him and to bring God's peace and God's justice and God's freedom and healing. And that, in his mind, is more important than family, more important than friends, more important than your own life, because this actually means a new kind of life, a new kind of world. And that's what he's inviting us to choose and to be part of when he makes these outrageous statements. I'll see you in the next video.